Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of our podcast, Is Breakfast Included? How are you? That's great. Yeah, it was really great. This week I sit down with Humza Sohail. Humza is a filmmaker, actor, and comedian based out of Brooklyn, New York. He's originally from Texas via Pakistan. We talk about that a lot in the beginning of this. Man, he was a really interesting kid. And I say kid because he's half my age, so I'm allowed to say that. He's got a great story, a very interesting story, and he's just getting started, man. I say this a lot. This isn't the last time we're going to hear his name. It was a fun conversation. He's a really good friend of my kids, and that's how I was connected with him. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's check it out.
I think it's funny that everybody else in the interviews, they have credits, but like my credits are like being your son's friend, like going to, well, going to school.
So, Tommy thinks a lot of you too.
Yeah,
which
I love Gavin and Tommy. They're both great.
Tommy's the one that told me about you a long time ago, and when he was here, I know he tried to connect with you. Tell me who you are.
Hi everyone, I am Humza Sohail. I'm a comic and I'm an actor and a writer here in New York now, originally from Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. Where in Dallas are you from?
So we bounced around a lot. My family immigrated from Pakistan, but I was the oldest one. Uh-huh. So I grew up in that Parkland, kind of like Harry Hines strip. Yeah. It's all just like strip clubs and immigrant food, you know?
The bazaars.
Yeah, exactly. You can buy like carpets and stuff out there. And then we moved around a lot. So like Plano, then Allen, and then in like high school, 8th, 9th grade, we ended up in Frisco. Yeah. Which was a real shock, to be honest, if you know Frisco. I haven't done this bit on stage, but I think about it a lot, which is I think like being like an immigrant child is like watching someone start like a new game of Grand Theft Auto. Like you start with like a shitty apartment and a shitty car, and then you have like a slightly less shitty apartment and like a slightly less shitty car. And that's kind of what we did until it was like shitty house, less shitty house. And then we moved to Frisco like a couple years before it just like exploded into
to what it is now.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a real shock. I wasn't like prepared for that. But yeah, so grew up all around Dallas.
So original from Pakistan.
Yeah.
Do you remember it at all?
No. So I was born in Parkland. I was born in Dallas. And I think my mom had come over like a year or two before that, and my dad came out here in 1990 in Oklahoma for college. Uh-huh. And like back then you'd get like a board, like you were like, hey, I want to go abroad. There was like a board, and you were just like, where do I meet the date registration for? And like you didn't know Oklahoma from like, Manhattan. Yeah. And so they were like, you got in, you get to go, and they're gonna ship you out to Oklahoma. And so he was like there for a while. Did like all sorts of like odd jobs, and just like had a lot of friends who were like other immigrants who got shipped out there, whatever, like the other.
So is it kind of like a lottery?
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you can come, but now
but you gotta go to Oklahoma.
Yeah. We're gonna put you in Altus, Oklahoma.
Exactly. Like I think actually he was in Edmond, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we landed in Dallas, and that's where I grew up.
Right on. What was it like for you being an immigrant kid? I mean, like, did you, from the get-go, you were a kid, you were a baby when you came here. Did you, being Mexican, like we spoke Spanish at home and English at school. Is that the way it was for you?
Yeah, definitely. Like I was learning Urdu / Hindi. They're pretty similar languages. One's spoken like in Pakistan, one's speaking in India, like predominantly, And I was learning English at the same time. And it was cool because I think when you're like the first kid, your parents are kind of young too. I think my parents were like 28, 29 when they had me. And I got to like witness them kind of like being, taken in the country too. So like, it's a lot of like going to Blockbuster and that kind of thing. And I was kind of soaking it up with them while it was happening. And that part of it was cool. You had your other, like even now my parents' family friends are just the other Pakistani people who were living in the apartment complex the day they moved in. And they were like, they just saw someone sweeping and they were like, do you guys want to have dinner together? And like, we know them now, like 30 years, 20 some years later. But it was not chill. at school. I went to elementary school, like, there's no cool way to say this, but basically right after 9/11. So I was like, there's like, there's no real cool way to say 9/11, but it was like, 9/12 onwards was like real rough.
I can imagine. I mean,
yeah, it was like, and it was Texas public school,
which is even.
Yeah. It was real crazy. And so I had to like develop thick skin early. And like kind of find my friends, and I would make friends or like find friendships in like, you're kind of like non-white community. So I had a lot of like black friends and Mexican friends, and like those are kids who got me, and it was I think I'm like the last generation where like school was how school used to be. Where I think you kind of relate to that.
It
was a snake pit, and so and every day it was like, every day you knew it was like, you could get tagged with it from a distance. It was like people didn't say my name as often. They were like saying a slur here or there. And it was like you went to school like knowing it was going to be a little stressful.
Yeah.
But I think I grew up in like a funny house. My dad and my uncle, they're like really funny guys, and they're like known for it. And I got really sharp tongued really early. Yeah. Because I knew I had to use it. So
exactly,
it was like,
man.
I couldn't fight or anything like that. So I was just real sharp, and I was kind of like defensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My son, Gavin.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, growing up with me, like the same thing. Like, I got called Migo a lot.
Yeah.
Boy. Just all the slurs.
Yeah, exactly.
And I told him, I said, well, I kind of learned early on, like, to find the most personal thing about someone. And
get in there. Yeah.
Make people laugh at them.
Yes.
And that's how it was. And I'm sure it was same with you. I told him, I was like, you should do that. But he could never have the what's the word? The ferociousness that I had against
He's
people.
like a sweet person. He genuinely is.
Like, I was brutal.
Yeah, I didn't have that exactly. I didn't have that either.
But that's how I coped with all that. And like you said, you grew up with thick skin. Yeah. Now you're, somebody said something to you, you're like...
Yeah, flipped. It's real easy when you have a head start, I think. But there's like a fine tuning to it when you're young where you're like, oh, I've gotten too good at this. And now the other kid's crying and now I feel like a jerk. I started off as a victim here, like what happened? So it was like a calibration.
Yeah. Thing. In the 80s, that was victory. If
the other kid's crying. Yeah. That's where you're done.
Yeah. So, comedy, man, how did you get into comedy? Like, what was the first person you saw and you're like, hey, that's...
So I think, like I said, so I was taking in America, like through my parents, kind of like through pop culture at the time. And I remember like 3 people being famous, which is like Jackie Chan, Jim Carrey, and Shah Rukh Khan, which is like the most famous Bollywood star like, in the world. I remember being like, Jim Carrey is the funniest guy ever. And I am him. Like I will, I was really young. I was really like a early class clown. But I think what it was, my parents really liked black comedy, and like they loved Martin Lawrence. They loved watching like Chris Rock movies. And my mom said it to me. I think it's so funny. She was like, when American comedy started coming to Pakistan, and like British comedy and American comedy started coming, they were always like, "This is so nerdy. This is so lame." Like to them, white comedy was like, it's too like boring. It was like start shirt. And whenever black comics started like making their way, they just identified with it. They were like, this is the tempo. This is like, this guy's being biting. He's being funny. He's like, he has a real, he's on, And so that was like the environment of like what my family liked, weirdly. And I had a friend also named Humza, whose dad was a real comedy head. He was like obsessive, and he would show us like, he gave us a box set of like the Chappelle Show, and a box set of, what was it? Is Austin Powers, like all 3, which is a crazy thing to give like a 9-year-old, you know? And it's an old comedy show, Get a Life, Chris Elliott. Yeah. So we had those 3 box sets, and then just Comedy Central. And I already had like a real interest in media. I would watch a lot of like, I was a very indoor kid because going outside had implications, So I was just soaking up pop culture, and it was like those kind of comedies were, I was just like studying them because that's what I do all day. There wasn't like a lot to do outside. And then I think YouTube like happened when I was like in the 5th grade or 6th grade. I remember YouTube comes out, and then I just dove in, and it was like, I treated it like school. Like I was like, I know I love stand up. I knew really early I wanted to do acting or like be in movies when I was like young. I would like write them out, and like I had a journal where I would like draw little comic books of the movie, and then I would like write what it was going to be about. And I just think I liked making people laugh, and so I tried studying it through YouTube. And you just put in like, I like Google in another tab, like who are the best stand-up comedians, and then I was like 11, and I was just like George Carlin, Louis C.K., you know, and it was like not maybe age appropriate, but we had like passed that, you know, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And and it was like really like kind of top down at first, like just being like, oh, this is supposed to be who is the best. What do I really like? You know, what do I not like?
Yeah.
And it was random. I didn't know I was doing something cool then, because I think as a kid you're just kind of innocent and you're just searching and trying to see what resonates. I remember loving Louis C.K. early. I remember liking Bill Burr, who used to be a white comic who did all the like the Def Jam comedy tours and stuff. And he would be like the one white guy, you know, back when in like the mid 2000s, being a comic was mostly you wore bootcut jeans and you had like a shiny dress shirt on, and he was like one of those guys. And Sam Kinison, I was obsessed. I was like 12. I thought Sam Kinison was like the funniest guy.
He was at the time. He ruled the world.
Yeah, and I knew I wanted to do.
For a very short time, he was the guy. Man.
Yeah, sadly, short time. You know, and
what about Bill Hicks?
I liked Bill Hicks too, and I liked Bill Hicks, and I remember like Bill Hicks is one of those guys where it was like in your top 5 list, no matter what you Google, they would be like, go watch Bill Hicks. I remember watching all of Bill Hicks, and it felt, you know, like when you're like starting to study something, like the subject feels so huge that it feels like it'll take you forever to get in. And then you like watch all that and you realize he was like performing for like 3 to 4 years. Like I didn't have like the comprehension that his career got cut short in the way it did. And now as an adult, I'm just like, you know, a lot of the stuff gets called like fake deep or whatever now, but I'm just like, I really marvel at like just knowing now the volume, like how much work, like how much really meaningful work you could do
in such a short time.
Yeah. And I was just exposed to all that. And I knew around like 6th, 7th grade that I wanted to do stand up.
So that early?
Yeah, really early.
I'll tell you a funny story. Growing up, I grew up in Corsicana. You know where that is?
Yeah, I do.
I managed a record store. Before they were record stores.
Yeah.
Called Hastings. And our area manager, the guy who ran like Corsicana and all the little small Hastings musics, was Steve Hicks, Bill's brother.
No way.
And he came in one day and was looking around, was asking us questions, you know, and then he said, how do the comedy cassettes or CDs do? We're like, well, you know, there's really not a big, you know, like a lot of people don't buy comedy. He goes, well, my brother's got a comedy tape and I just want, you know, and it was dangerous.
Whoa.
And
I see.
I said, your brother, I thought, okay, he's famous, you know, and so I bought it, took it home, and was never the same after that.
Yeah.
Never the same.
He broke
Everything
it to
Bill
you.
Hicks said in the 90s is so relevant now.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, I always say, you know, this world could use Bill Hicks right now. Like Carlin.
Yeah.
Carlin was that guy who said it like it was, and, you know, but he wasn't always that guy.
Yeah.
You know, Carlin wasn't always that guy. But Bill Hicks was always the guy for me.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's cool because I think there's no like, I mean, there's an American Comedy Institute or something, but there's really not like a school for comedy. You kind of just like devote a lot of personal time to like tracing the careers of other people.
Yeah.
And like even just seeing, you know, like Bill Burr's probably like one of the most famous like comedians alive now and has like a giant network and stuff. And it's cool to trace people's careers. And as a kid, just being an immigrant kid, being like, no one's going to want me to go do stand up. You know, there's like a pressure. You're like, people have really sacrificed to get you to the point where you're like even here. So the idea of like, and I think my worst luck was I was like good at school. And so it was an expectation that like you would do something with it. And to me, I think as a kid, I was like so obsessed with daydreaming that I was like, homework is the thing you have to do to get it out of your face so you can go do the other stuff. And I could never understand why other kids were like putting it off for later. I was like, I want this done now so I can go, invent something. And over time, I think it became that like kids are just so, you don't know your power as a kid. And it really became time like someone was handing me a Rubik's Cube. I would like, just solve it so you get out of my face. It was kind of what was going on. And I knew that I would have to kind of like teach myself like pretty early on. I just knew like the stakes as an immigrant kid of that time. You just knew like it wasn't going to be the same as it was for other people you were even like studying. I remember telling friends of mine in like the 7th grade, I was like at the lunch table and I was like, guys, I think the talent show's coming up this year. They're like, yeah. And I was like, I think I want to do stand-up comedy. And they just like were all quiet and they looked at me and they were like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I was like, yeah, definitely. No, I was kidding about that. And
but to kids, because I grew up, I love comedy more than music, and I'm in the music industry.
Yeah.
It's people don't see it as a path.
No, it's like lame. It's
they see it, to them comedy is what's on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Ray Romano or whoever the fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
was doing that then, or
George Lopez. I love George Lopez.
George Lopez. Are there any comedians you don't like?
Oh man!
Other than Carlos Mencia.
You know who I wanted. Who like child me wanted to fist fight was fucking. He's such a. He's like otherwise pretty harmless. Jeff Dunham, the Ahmed the Dead Terrorist guy.
Yeah.
Ahmed the Dead Terrorist like made my life hell for like 4 years.
Of course he did.
Because it's like, that hits and it's like, I mean, it touches elementary schools. That was like the crack epidemic. It was like next day. I mean, Ahmed. I'm seeing Ahmed merchandise. The teachers are doing it. It was crazy. So
he's from Richardson, right?
Yeah, I had a teacher who was like, "Oh, I went to school with Jeff Dunham. He's so funny." She would like love. So that's my one.
Her Ahmed t-shirt.
Yeah, that's my one. I have one now, so I tracked down I found a vintage one.
You said something earlier. You had another friend named Humza. Is that a common name?
I think it was of the mode at some point, like in the late 90s, because I now know a few Humzas. Growing up, it was just me and my one friend.
It's kind of like in Mexicans, it's Jose.
Yeah. Well, also growing up in Texas, everybody thought I was Mexican. And like
I was waiting for that.
Yeah, and I had a lot like it happens in New York all the time, and it happens like with Mexican people. Like it's not like white people are thinking I'm Mexican. It's like Mexican people always think I'm Mexican. And I think brown people think it's like a compliment. I'll get in cabs a lot, and they'll be like, "Oh, Humza, where are you from?" Which happens like invariably for me because the driver's always like another Muslim immigrant, and he'll ask me like, "Where are you from?" And I'll tell him, and he'll be like, "Oh man, that's awesome for you. You don't really look like one of us. You look like Spanish or something." I'm like, this is, real confusing note to take. To some people, it's a plus.
Yeah. So your parents, they kind of dove into the whole Western culture, correct?
Kind of, yeah. It's real weird because I think for them, it's got to be more discombobulating because I think they really did kind of like do both, It's like a balancing act, I think, for them to be like, well, we have other Pakistani like immigrant friends, and you try and create like a small culture that is what you grew up in.
Yeah.
But then you're also like in the modern world, like as it's forming.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. I think now my parents, I think are pretty like adjusted and assimilated, so it's not the toughest thing to get through to them. But it was like, I mean, that was like the name of the game growing up, was like seeing like how much we were allowed to do stuff or how much we weren't allowed to do stuff.
Those boundaries.
Yeah, or like we do things this way, other people do it this way. And I knew plenty of other kids who were like going through that. So that calmed me down just because Dallas is such a, like I tell people in New York, like I try and explain what Texas is like because I think they have like a skewed perspective of it. And I tell them, it's like pretty diverse. We're just not in charge. Like there's a lot of us. We're just not in charge.
Yeah. It's exactly. Yeah, I mean, I have friends here, and they had to come to Texas to kind of see it.
Yeah,
but it is where you went to school, Frisco. That's like a huge melting pot right there.
Definitely.
Yeah, like you said, but unfortunately,
Yeah, and it was tough.
You can't organize.
Yeah, it was tough because there was enough of us, and you try, and then I think the consensus would be like, oh, we got to move on. We got to like pack bags and you know, hop a train or something.
What did your parents want you to do? What did they expect you to do?
I think like for a while they were like wanted me to be a doctor or something, but I don't think it was ever really that specific. I think it was like, we want you to be smart and do something smart. Because I would like, you know, I'd have teachers like pulling us out a lot, and they'd talk to him and be like, you know, he's really bright at this or that, at writing, or I was like our school's English writing type kid.
Yeah.
But he's like a class clown, and he like is always, you know, he gets done with his work too fast, and then we have to like invent more work for him, or next thing you know, he's like leading the class in like a revolution. So I think they just wanted me to do something, I think, a little more academic. And by high school, I was already like playing in, so I guess to rewind, I started doing stand-up comedy the year after I moved from the town to another. So like I was like 13 or 14. And I moved to a new school. I was a new kid, and I was like, I'd been shit on for like 7 grades worth of schooling. So I was like, 8th grade, Humza, we're reinventing, man. Like, we're coming in different. So I joined the football team. And I don't know anything about football. I just used to be a real big kid. I was a big kid. I was Muslim. I used to dress like 50 Cent. I just had like a target on me at all times, you know? And so I moved, and I was like, I'm going to join the football team. We're going to figure this out. And they don't like teach you when you get there. They don't teach you anything. So like, the first day of practice, I was like, what the fuck do you mean I have to tackle something? Like, what do you mean? And so I was terrible at football, but I would make everybody laugh in the locker room. Yeah. And so I was like a new kid, and the guys were like, oh, new kid is very funny. And I was like, okay, good. This is good, you know? And other kids would be like, oh, you should do stand up, which was very different than being at the other school, right, and your friends being like, about? Never bring that up again, you know? So I did stand up, which feels crazy now. I think there's after a certain age, you stop viewing child you as yourself and just like as a child, like someone else. Yeah. And I'm just very in awe of that kid who was like 13 and like was willing to just go up in front of the whole school and do stand up. And I think by that point, I was a little shit. I thought I was an adult at 13. I was like, my mannerisms on stage were like a grown up comics, and my whole thing was like, oh, look how dumb all the other 13-year-olds are. You know, it was like really wry and observational. I really like David Cross. But I was like 13, and it was all that, but about being a new kid and getting your lunch stolen and stuff like that. And
that was your act?
Yeah, that was my act. And it was on YouTube for a while. I just archived it because I was like, it sucks for me to watch, but other people would watch it all the time and like send me screenshots. So it's down right now, but it exists. And kids really liked it. The teachers really liked it. And so there was a lot of encouragement. And I liked it because then all of a sudden all the kids knew me and were like nice to me. And so I did that, and I did that for like a year or so. And I got to high school, and all of a sudden it was like, I was like, well, I still have to, I can only do stand up at school because I'm not 21. So I can't go to like the clubs to do it. And then they censor, like I was like, ooh, I'm getting freaking censored, man. But I was like 14. I was like, I can't do my jokes. I can't cuss. I can't talk about, I remember I had some joke in my 8th grade one where it was like, I made some joke at the expense of the Nazis or something. And I remember a teacher being like, well, you know, you can't do the bit about the Nazis. And so instead I got on stage and I did a bit about how I couldn't do a bit about the Nazis because there might be some Nazis in the crowd here today. And then I would like act out being a kid and be like, Dad, can we go get ice cream after the show? And him being like, no, you know? And I was like, at 13, I think I was really trying to do something kind of edgy. Yeah. And I went into like high school thinking I was going to lose my edge if I kept, you know, the principal likes you, and the principal's a real Ronald Reagan-y type of guy. It just doesn't make you cool. Yeah. Being a child stand-up, like no matter how cool you are, feels like, you know, you have a side part and suspenders on and like a bow tie. It just isn't, after a while I didn't feel cool. And I went through like my angsty phase in high school, and just started hanging out with, you know, light mischief makers and the like and stuff. And at that point I really got into film and like filmmaking, and all my friends became kids who were like in bands or like wanting to play music, like Gavin, like Tommy, or like kids who were making music or like wanting to make films. And I just got really into that and had my little angsty phase where I wasn't really doing stand up much. I was just like kind of coasting off being funny in high school and being like known as a funny person and just like felt like.
Were you still writing?
Yeah, definitely. And I started learning how to write screenplays and stuff. So all of that just kind of went into like a bigger picture. And did that until like the end of high school and like had capstones and stuff like that for it. And got into like the schools I wanted, but it just wasn't an option. Like it wasn't an option, not just like in the family I come from, but like just money wise. And you know, I got in, but you'd have to pay through the nose for like ever to go. And so then I was like, well, I don't know what to do anymore because there's all this stuff I want to do, and that like I get good reviews at it. I know I'm not like wasting my time here, but I don't know how to like keep going doing it. And so I ended up going to school to study like where they gave me a scholarship. I chose somewhere where I could go to school on a scholarship, even though it was like the city college, and it would give me enough money to where I could live on campus, even though I was only like 30 minutes from home. So I could have some like kind of independent setup. And I thought that it would depress the comedy out of me. Like I was like, fuck, this is it. I'm doing business now. But it didn't. And like all my friends were still playing in bands. And so they would ask me to write videos for them, or like they'd want to work on something. And so I was like, okay, well, I thought, it was a dream deferred, but it wasn't. And so then I joined my college's honors college at this, for the arts, like for humanities at the same time. And so then I would like do half of my coursework, like learning business, because I wanted to know how to like promote yourself. And then the other half, like learning how to make movies, how to like write poetry, or like take dumb classes, where I felt like creative, and just kind of tried to like go to like a parallel school where I was kind of teaching myself, because I didn't want to quit or like lose that easy, and then moved out here after honestly taking a few more years of just L's and the quarantine and all that, and just working like on projects and scripts in between.
Before you moved out here, did you ever perform at any of the clubs?
So I did. So I started playing in bands in high school, and we're in like rap groups and stuff, and we actually like were like really active. Like I played a lot of that growing up, and I wouldn't do much stand up. I would make little short films where I was acting and I was doing comedy, and I hadn't done stand up in like a long time. And I moved to New York after a band I was in that was like I'd put years into, and I was kind of like I wasn't a front man, and I felt really good about that. I was like, you know what, maybe I'm a guy on the side. Maybe all this other stuff isn't meant to be. I just love art. I'll hang out. And we'd put a lot of time into it, and we were starting to get like traction, bigger festivals. We went out to South by and stuff, and the guys in the band kind of fight and like dissipated, and all our work was gone because everybody had hands on it and stuff. And then the quarantine started, and I was like, well, what I hate being alive, and what am I here for? And it was just enough. It was like that Lethal Weapon Mel Gibson thing where I like had a death wish, shot unstoppable. And I was like, fuck it, I'll move to New York. And I just wrote a lot before moving. And I got out here and I forced myself to go to an open mic. And on the way there, I just kept thinking, like, it's been like a decade since I did comedy. As a child, I was like a child phenom. If I go up there today and I bomb, my entire childhood is ruined. Like I'll find out I sucked the whole time, So it was like a crazy amount of the yips where I was like, if I bomb right now, I suck right now, and also I think I retroactively sucked the whole time. But it went well. It went well, and I went up anonymous. I didn't tell any of my friends or anything. I went up and did well. So I started doing open mics here, and I started by doing films and stuff up here, making ad films with a friend of mine who makes ad films. I started meeting people who were like, oh, I have a friend who's a comic, or et cetera, et cetera. And they would like tell their comic friends about me. And those guys were like, well, dude, I think you're still a comic. Like, I think you should still do stand up. And they started inviting me out to do stand up. And it kind of forced me to do it. And now I'm back in the swing of it. And
How often are you doing it?
I go up, I think, at least 3 times a month. And it's cool because for me, I think at this point, it's like an acting exercise. Like it keeps me sharper. I feel like it helps me perform and kind of get over things as an actor.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the month, I make films. So like I have a day job. I used to have a kind of call center-y day job. I did that for a while and freelanced, and now I work in like advertising, which is cool. I like it more because it's tangentially related to like filmmaking. I can like meet people who do that, and I freelance like making films with a friend of mine, Ryan Abrams, who I also met from back home once I was out here. Who's also a filmmaker, and so we'll make like ad films together or shoot for modeling agencies and stuff. They do like kind of like the video portfolios for models, and then we'll make our own films. We are like, we take it pretty seriously, so we get together and we write most of the time, or we'll have like some short that we're working on the immediate term, and then like usually a script that we're trying to pitch like on a spec level. And then that's really like my rhythm. It's like I work kind of, tangentially then I audition in between, and then I'll like generate work, and 3-4 times I go and do stand up, and then in between I'm just with all the comics and all the other.
So what's the end goal? Filmmaking, acting, or comedy?
I think for me, it's like before anything, it's filmmaking. Like I think for me, like all of the other stuff folds up, right? So like I love doing stand up because it is its own thing, and it lets me have an outlet for a lot of like, you have your thoughts, and you have thoughts you think all the time, but you don't know if they're any good. And it's nice sometimes to be able to go on stage and say something and get like an immediate response.
Yeah.
And to just hear laughter. Like it just feels really good on like on a level that I can't intellectualize, to like make people laugh or to like, have fun in the room that way. But like as a professional, I think for me it's writing. That's why I like stand up. I think acting is kind of like writing. You're doing it live, but for me it is making films. Like I don't think I've done anything as much as I've like watched movies alone, very specifically alone.
No, I get it, man. So you moved out here during the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, and the pandemic. No, I'm just kidding.
Not during the pandemic.
Yeah, satire.
What was it like?
So
because Texas never shut down, really.
Right. Yeah. No, it was crazy because, like I said, I was in a Mel Gibson state of mind when I moved out here, and I was like, I'll just move. I'm not going to sweat the details too much. But I did find a place, and it was a studio firm. It was really, really North Manhattan, like Washington Heights, a little above Washington Heights. And I knew like 1 or 2 people in the city. And the day I moved, I didn't know till I got there. I don't know why I didn't check, but it was a blizzard. And so I could get off the plane, and I just look outside, and there's like snow, like everywhere. Like you can't see out the windows. And I'm like, okay. So I grab my stuff, and I meet the landlord of the building at like 181, like just at the butt end of Manhattan. And it's snowing hard, and I like kind of move myself in, and I get in there, and New York's pretty closed at that point. And I remember just spending like the first week just kind of in there listening to like records and like just kind of hanging out. And kind of like figuring out like how this was gonna go. And I really didn't know what I was doing for like a good like 3 to 6 months, because there wasn't much to do, Yeah. And then when stuff started opening up, I started going to some of like those first open mics, and at that point I'd been in the city like 3-4 months, and had kind of gotten used to like drudging around and all that, and so I had a little bit of the thick skin,
Yeah.
And then I feel like people were waiting. Like as soon as stuff opened up, it was kind of full bore. And like since then, I've been doing stuff.
I know the obvious differences, but what's the biggest difference for you
in New York?
Between Texas and New York?
Gee, you know what it is like everything that causes friction or like was like a pain in the ass in Texas for me, just like identity wise or like, desire wise, it's like rewarded in New York. Like I come out here and it's like, you're not fitting in because you have a weird music taste. You're like fitting in because you have a weird music taste, or like you're meeting plenty of people who have the same, there's a really like a lovely community in Texas. And I have so many friends in Texas who are like me, who are like progressive people or they're artists or whatever, but all of us are like struggling out there. And what I think is interesting out here is like, it's almost kind of like the default mode. And also like, I like being from the South when I'm up here because I think it gives you a little bit of grit and a little bit of character that a lot of people raised up here like don't have.
Yeah, it does.
It's kind of a superpower, especially like the younger you are. I feel like city kids are very good at not being like over impressed by anything. You know, they're really good at like they're real cool about everything, but they get overwhelmed by stuff real easily.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about, I think, having a bit of like a traditional Texan upbringing is you just kind of like you have your P's and Q's and all that stuff, and I appreciate that still. There's like people are nice and they're confident about it, you know, and I like carrying those kind of things around. But in New York, I think it's all the things that I kind of gotten used to already out in Texas, but like the graduate level version of it, which is like as an immigrant, you're really on the outside. You're not going to like. You don't have any of the name brand stuff. You're not going to go to the name brand school. You're not in like any of the acting studios or programs. All you have is just like good reviews and like willpower.
Yeah.
And I think I had taken all my licks and stuff by the time I left Dallas. So like the pride and all that, like it's been ground out of you, you know, like all of that is gone. And so I showed up, I had a healthy like appetite to, you know.
So was this the second time in your life, like other than joining the football team and reinventing yourself, is coming here and like Texas? I'm leaving Texas behind.
Yeah, I was good at that. I think so. I went to a commuter, so I went to UTD, and it was everybody was pretty focused on like being like a computer science type kid or just getting in and going out. And I found out that I was kind of a loner there, and I found out that we did indeed have a study abroad department, but like none of the kids were interested in it. Everybody was so focused on like the math and science of it all. And I was like one of the few people who weren't. And so they were like, you know, if you apply for this grant, you might be able to get some money. And I was like, to go to Europe? I was like, nobody in my family has, I think, maybe gone to Europe, you know, like that. And so I did, and I got accepted. And what was interesting is our school didn't really have like a framework. So I got in this program in Germany, but there was no like, they just gave you kind of like a lump sum and they just tell you where to go. And I just showed up there. I was alone. It was me, like 150 kids from around the world. And just like, I was the only other American. I was the only American. And so I'm just kind of historically good at showing up places or just kind of existing, you know, like when you like band living and all the kids I knew, it was like hard living it was like kind of, it was easy. Like, you know, like all you need is a couch and like two dudes who have you know, a resin kind of cleaner, and that's really all you need to get through like a week when you're like 22, you know?
Right.
And so I was good at just kind of like getting through whatever. I think I'm still good at that. Like, thinking about the future. So I was just like, whatever, it'll hurt a little bit, but I'll get through it. And that's kind of like what keeps me in it still, I think, is being like, the present is the present, but what could the future be? Which is, I think, like the focus of my film project right now, which is what I'm working on.
Are your parents supportive of it?
I think my parents are like, it's kind of, to them, it's an undeniable thing at this point. Like personality wise, it's like, this kid is like, you're not going to put a tie on a monkey and, you know, like you can't do it. So it's that thing of like, yeah, like he seems to be able to figure out how to pay rent and like clothe himself, and, you know, he's doing better than a lot of his friends. Like, he's got something he needs to figure out. That was my grandma told me that. I was just in Pakistan for a wedding, and she was doing that thing where she like looked around at everybody and she was like, who's getting married next? Like, you know? And she was going, and she pointed at me and she was like, he's not going to get married yet. There's something he needs to do first. He's like figuring something outside. And I don't know if it's like an energy I give off, but
I was going to ask you that. Have you had you ever been to Pakistan?
Yeah, so growing up, like I said, like saving, we never went on vacation anywhere else, but like every 3-4 years we just save what we had and like go back to see family. So I'd go back every 3-4 years, and like we'd go back and we'd spend like a month or two there. We'd like really be out there. And my family's from Karachi, which is like really, it's like really similar to like a Hong Kong or like a New York. It's like the city, you know, they're city folks. And Karachi people are really funny and they're really sharp, but it's like New Yorker humor. It's like, you know, a lot of ironic nicknames. You know, if you're bald, you're shiny. You know, you got glasses, you're carrots or something like that. That's you know the slick school of you know, they're slick talkers, and I think life is like stressful in big cities everywhere, and so like people have like a really dark, funny way of approaching it, and that's like definitely the culture I come from.
So that's really cool. You grew up appreciating that side of your heritage as well.
Yeah, and like I think my dad, being in Texas or being in the suburbs, like would complain a lot about being like feeling like he had you know, cooled off too much. He had domesticated himself. Like, you know, he was like,
I don't get my edge anymore.
Yeah, exactly. He lost his edge, that kind of thing. Yeah, but that was I guess his struggle.
Right on. Are you working on anything right now?
Yeah, so I have to always be working, and there's definitely I think more serious like studio your spec scripts you write to get pitched and to get bought by people, and then there's work that I've generated, you know, like for me and other directors and stuff I'm friends with to make. And there's a friend I have, a really close friend of mine named Ryan Abrams, who's originally from back home too, who lives out here, and he makes ad films out here. And when we met, we had a mutual friend who was like, both of you guys are the most like film crazy people I know. You've like made major life sacrifices. You guys should be friends with each other because you're both just kind of doing the same thing alone. And he wanted to meet somebody who was writing narrative because he wanted to not maybe focus on writing ads as much. And so we developed like a short film series called The Birds Are in the Air. And it's kind of about the story of these two guys that are close to us and not us, and who are hustling in the city to kind of take flight to do something.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of friends who are artists and stuff, and it's really, I think, about the process of like learning, getting over yourself, taking your licks and stuff, and working despite that. And we knew that like we couldn't write something believably where like everything works out in the end, because it hasn't yet, right? But we were qualified to write about like the process of like just keeping the faith and sticking around, you know, and taking your lumps. When you're young, you think it'll work out like in a year or two, you know, and you have all this like pride and ego. But you don't know that it's like a lifelong process. And so we really love doing the show because it's somewhere between like a film series and a show, where we treat it like Calvin and Hobbes or like Snoopy, where like they're going to explore themes, but it's kind of the same setup, you know? So each film is a different theme or like a different place in Ryan and Humza. We act in them as well as lives. But it can be like a year later, or an episode can take place over the course of a whole year. And each one's like a standalone little film. And we wrote 5 of them. And so we just finished the second. We're probably like a week out from locking it, and, you know, 2 weeks out. And that'll be coming out hopefully next month. And our goal with those is to just like make things that we can immediately share with like other artists, with people we like, and like show people like, hey, this is our design language. Like, this is how we act. This is how we talk. This is what we're into. And like try and get more work, you know? And then after that, we write a lot to like pitch, you know, to people who will take the time to listen to us. But
right on.
You got to do something before then. So those are like, that's our demo, you know?
How will you be releasing them?
Vimeo, YouTube, like kind of your traditional like digital, and then we promote pretty heavily on social. And for this one, we're not sure yet because we're locking the venue. The first one we had a premiere at Spring Studios in Soho, so we usually try and premiere it somewhere, just because like New York's great. You can get a community of like 100 people to turn out, and so we like premiering it, so at least 100 people will see it and talk to you about it.
Whoever
you know?
will come out.
Exactly. Right on. So that's what we're gearing up to. I've been the edit for that.
I know, man. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on YouTube by putting in my name. On Instagram, you can put in @ShahrukKhanman. I'll spell that out: ShahrukH. Khanman. I wasn't one of the spelling bee brown kids. I was the other branch of them. Yeah. I'll link it to you. Shah Rukh Khan is like the most famous Bollywood actor in the whole world. He's like considered like maybe the most famous celebrity in the world. Right. And I was always the kid who like wanted to act and all that stuff in school. And so like the other brown kids would call me Shah Rukh Khan. They'd be like, you're like, as a joke, you know? Yeah. So my IG handle is Shah Rukh Khan Man, because I'm like a knockoff, like a budget, like a version of that.
We'll link it. We'll
link it. Yeah. And then on there's also like stand up and a link to birds and all that stuff. And I like to kind of keep it free of like any one form. I do like sketch work, and I just kind of like the idea of like going to a place where people know you as a person. They kind of get what you're about, and then you can, whatever art you're working on, there's a place because people are interested in following you. I think I'm doing a good enough job so far of building it, but that's what I really love, is to be able to like go between things,
Right on, man. Well, I appreciate you making the trek to Jersey City. My boys think a lot of you.
Yeah.
I know that Tommy especially was, you got to talk to my friend. You got to talk to my friend. And I'm really glad I did, man.
Tommy's great. Tommy's shot was in like broadcast when we were in like the 7th or 8th grade. And he was the cameraman who came out to shoot my stand-up or whatever.
Oh, really?
And he gave me the footage of it. It was the first time I'd done stand-up, and he was like, "You're really funny." And he like sent me the footage. So he's like literally the first, like day one, he's like, first day supporter.
Right on, man. Yeah. He was here in July, and I know he tried to connect with you.
I really wanted him to get out there because he's really supportive. I think if I didn't have like the support of so many other artists and cool people growing up, I don't know that I would have like kept going, because it wasn't anything else, like there's no incentive. So
it's good to have that support.
Yeah, like I'll come out to Jersey if you'll be nice to me. Like if you want, that's great.
And I was willing to come to Brooklyn too.
Yeah, I respected that.
Well, dude, my podcast is called "Is Breakfast Included?" Mm-hmm. If it was, what would you have?
Oh man, I love. It's a continental breakfast in this case, or is it just whatever
you want?
I'm like, I love disc shaped hash browns, like the like a flat hash brown.
Yeah,
it would be like 2 of those with real greasy bacon,
like the Waffle House.
Yes,
hash browns?
Yes, like big squares. Yeah, and it'd be bacon, turkey, and orange juice, some pulp. I think that's it. Yeah,
I know, man.
Yeah, and bad diner coffee.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Humza, thank you for coming by.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
for having
me. Dealing with my small setup here.
Are you kidding?
And let's keep in touch, man.
I would love that.
All right?
Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Right on, Humza Sohail. Good kid, right? I'm still allowed to say good kid, right? He's half my age. You can find him on Instagram at SheraKhanMan. We'll put the link in the anchor. Check out his video series, The Birds Are in the Air. I think he said episode 1 or the first part is up on Vimeo and YouTube. And just keep track of him, man. Support these independent filmmakers, artists, comedians, everything. All right, guys, I am done. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you next week.